Today's episode kicks off differently. Instead of easing in with career highlights, our guest, behavioural science expert and author Phil Barden, opens straight with a T-Mobile campaign disaster that changed the entire course of his career. And instead of hiding that away at the bottom of the show, like some guests do, everybody wants to share a mistake, but usually at the end, Phil brings it right to the beginning.
I feel like I'm in a confessional, and it's good to, to be
It's a
rid
safe
of this.
space. No one can hear you, Phil.
Okay, all right, yeah. There's no one listening, just you two.
So this week's show is how you can get more out of behavioural science, neuroscience, and use it in your day-to-day for your marketing.
We're not telling you whether the ad is good or bad. We will just tell you how the brain will process that.
Phil is brilliant, and I think I'm going to have to get him on for a second episode. And he's convinced me to buy his book, Decode. So if you like neuroscience and you want to learn how to use behavioural science to make better marketing campaigns, this episode is for you. Enjoy. Phil Barden, welcome to the show.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me.
No, you're welcome. You're welcome. And we've also got a special guest star. Will Ockendon's back on the show after 10 episodes. Welcome, Will. How you feeling?
Well, it's been one episode, Chris, and it's been one episode that I couldn't make.
I told the guys I was going to do that in the office.
Anyway, that's a good one.
Phil, welcome to the show. This is very unusual. Most people that come on the show want us to do the mistake after they've talked about how brilliant they are in their careers. And you've sort of said, actually, I want to start with my mistake at T-Mobile. So T-Mobile, well, that takes me back, having a T-Mobile phone. Is that the days of Nokia? When did T-Mobile stop being T-Mobile as well?
Oh, goodness. It was 2010 or a bit later. They merged with Orange in the UK. So it was joint venture between Deutsche Telekom and France Telecom. And then that all got subsumed into EE, which has carried on ever since.
Right, that's where they are, EE, because everybody wanted to be on Orange. I remember Orange was quite a cool network back in the day.
Yeah,
that was the days when you had to pay for your text messages, wasn't it?
Indeed.
They did Orange Tuesdays, wasn't it, with free cinema tickets?
Oh, yeah. Well, very good. Yeah.
Orange Tuesdays. Bring back to, and then you get the team. I'm sure there's a T-Mobile arena somewhere, isn't there?
Oh, there is in Germany, because they're the sponsors of Bayern Munich.
Ah, yeah, there you go. That's where I know it from. Probably when they knocked Liverpool out of the cup.
So we're delaying. Let's hear the mistake.
So the mistake.
Yeah, true.
So,
true.
Yeah,
So,
I feel
fill us in.
Feel like I'm in a confessional, and it's good to to be
it's a
rid
safe
of this.
Space. No one can hear you, Phil.
Okay, all right. Yeah, there's no one listening. Just you two.
No.
Yeah. So I was VP for the brand in Europe, and charged with relaunching the brand around Europe, and we'd come up with a very interesting proposition. You were talking just a minute ago about back in the days when you had texts and minutes, and people bought tariffs based on fixed bundles of a number of minutes and a number of texts, and people got mightily fed up if they had, for example, used up all their minutes but had loads of text remaining as almost like credit, but then they got charged a lot of money for making voice calls, and vice versa. So that insight led us to create a flexible tariff called, ironically, Flexed. And what Flexed did was basically bundle the minutes and text together. And so it didn't matter which you used. You could deplete text and then use your minutes, or deplete minutes and use text. So it was lovely. It was really flexible. And to communicate this, we briefed the agency to come up with a creative idea, which they did, which was lovely, which was about things that are rock solid and rigid now flex. So things that you had thought previously were inflexible are now flexible. And we did quite a few different ads, and one of them had a guy leaning on a brick wall and gazing over a park, and the brick wall was flexing under his weight, under his arms. And there was a bit of text about the proposition, and this ad just really bombed, and we couldn't understand why, because we thought this was a lovely creative device, and we've got our guy there who's using the tariff, and that coincided with me being introduced to a couple of guys from a company called Decode. One's a neuroscientist and the other is a psychologist. And I showed them this ad and I said, look, here's the brief, here's the proposition. why do you think this ad doesn't work? And they looked at it and said, well, it's obvious. Really? Why? What's obvious? And they said, well, what you've got there, I understand what you're trying to do, but what you've got is a guy standing behind a physical barrier. He's gazing over into a park, and what he can see in the middle distance is a bunch of people having a great time, picnicking, playing frisbee, enjoying themselves. And guess what? He's the loner stuck on his own behind the wall. So it was almost like buy flexed if you want to have no mates. And that was the takeout. You know what? Daniel Kahneman, the late professor of psychology, had this lovely expression, which is WYSIART, which stands for, it's an acronym, it stands for what you see is all there is. And it doesn't matter how convoluted the sales pitch from your ad agency is, or the sort of reconciliation you do and the post-rationalization you do in your mind to think, well, people will think X, Y, Z, or the takeout will be A, B, C. No, just prototypically, what does that stand for? What you see is all there is. Because the brain doesn't give you a second chance. It's going to consume that stimulus in a second, if that. So you've just got to get across intuitively your desired meaning. So that was the big mistake, but it was also a massive eye-opener and opened my eyes to the world that these two guys inhabited, the world of what they call decision science. And I gave them more work to do. And the more I worked with them, the more I realized that they'd kind of cracked the nugget of the essence of marketing is about behavior change, right? All marketing is behavior change. We want people to buy our brand, buy more, switch, tell people, share stuff, go online, whatever it might be. It's about human behavior. And these guys were coming from fields of study that have been looking at human behavior for 200 years. And that, frankly, they knew a lot more than the commercial world did. So that mistake led to me working more with them, getting really excited by this whole idea of decision science. And in the end, I quit my job to join them, to set the company up in the UK. So, it was a great mistake to make in retrospect. A mistake nonetheless, but one that had a happy ending.
What did you do with the actual TV ad then? Did you redo it? And because it does feel like a bit like he was a bit of a peeping Tom in this video.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the TV ad, also we had to make some changes. So it had someone jumping out of a window onto a pavement, and the pavement flexed almost like a trampoline, like a sort of rubber pavement. But the first cut of that ad had him jumping off a balcony, and people who saw it, myself included, for the first time, sort of, he's committing suicide. Yeah, that, again, what you see is all there is. That someone throws himself off a balcony. That's not nice, right? So we cut that. We cut that bit, and we had him then going out of a ground floor window, so would land safely, but still we got the little indentation on the pavement as his feet touch the ground.
Yeah, it sounds like the ad agency could do with a couple of behavioural scientists on their staff, by the sounds of it. Those two executions.
Yeah, and what it really brought home to me, this thing that when you are sitting in a creative presentation, more often than not, the agencies use phrases such as consumers will think that blah blah blah, or the takeout will be blah blah blah. How do you know that? That's just you trying to sell a piece of creative. You don't know that's what the prototypical objective, impartial, not really bothered view of Joe Public is going to be. That's why it's crucial to take a very neutral stance on this, which is what these guys did in Germany. They said, we're agnostic. We're not telling you whether the ad is good or bad. We will just tell you how the brain will process that. What are the meanings? Because the brain's constantly predicting things and trying to recode stimuli into meaning. So, man standing behind a wall on his own, divorced from a group of friends, having a group of people having a good time. What does that typically mean? That's the level that you need to approach this at.
Are we getting more sophisticated? I mean, I assume this was a few years ago. Now, we've done a few behavioural science conversations on the show, and the impression I'm getting is, brands and agencies are becoming more aware of this stuff. It's not just a kind of, as you say, intuitively just believing this is what people will think. I mean, what's your experience of that? Are brands more open to using behavioral science?
They definitely are. When I first started this, so that was like 15 years ago now, it was a lonely path to tread. It really was. And, my first port of call was so I set up the business with no clients, but with this conviction that this was a really powerful approach. Went back to see all my old mates at Unilever, where I'd grown up. They graciously gave me some time. I explained this all, and they sat there, and their reaction was, "Wow, this feels so right, but it's a bit too difficult to process right now. I'm back to the day job." And I couldn't understand that, but I guess I had the personal experience that I went through with T-Mobile that had galvanized me. But since then, we've had a number of factors. So Daniel Kahneman wrote Thinking Fast and Slow. It's a multi-million global bestseller. Rory Sutherland of the Ogilvy Agency led a charge on behavioral economics when he was president of the IPA. And he's continued to do so with annual events like Nudge Stock. So he's still a great proponent. And then other people have come into the field. So I remember going to meet Richard Shotton when he was still agency side and presenting stuff to him. And Richard, along the way had a road to Damascus moment like me, and quit and set up on his own, and has now written 3 books. Fantastic.
He's been a guest on the show as well. We've probably had 6 or 7 behavioural scientists. It's a really interesting, because everybody's got a slightly different take on it. And when we and Will talk to people, we haven't actually had Rory on yet, but he's a target. If he's out there, we hope to get him on soon. But what gets me is everybody's got a slightly different take. There's all these different types of bias. And you listen to everybody's key tips on how to get more out of behavioural science. But actually, sometimes they work against each other as well. So for instance, I spoke to someone recently called Nancy Harhut. I don't know if you know her, we were talking about the bias of where, social proof, where you walk past a restaurant, it's full. And she gave an example of where she'd walked past one and she went in the one that was full. And it turned out the one that was recommended was fuller later. So she'd used social proof the wrong way around. And but there's so many different, you could go completely AI on it and go, right, AI and behavioral science the hell out of my campaign. Here's my campaign. Now do me a million different variations, and then you would test it, right? Is that the 2026 way to go about marketing now? Is that what we should all be doing?
I don't see why not. I mean, to be honest, the stuff that's in the LLMs, I think will replace a lot of consultancies now, because that knowledge is no longer resident in one person who does the desk research and gathers all the studies. You can go and ask Chat or Claude or whoever to summarize it, and not only summarize it, but give you the recommendations. What are the pluses and minuses? How would you apply it to the following problem? And it does a pretty decent job. So that will revolutionize a lot of places and workflows that hitherto existed. So I think the place where it will still exist is where people have got something that is not replicable. So, for example, they've got quant research approaches that AI simply can't do. So that still gives an angle for individual agencies and consultancies.
Brilliant. And you've written a book, right? Do you want to tell us a bit about your book? Because I think that with books, we've had a few authors on the show too, and it's such an undertaking. So well done to write a book. But how did you go about tackling it, and what was the mission that you were trying to achieve by writing a book? Because some people go, do you know what, Chris? I just wrote it so we could get, if you've written a book, it looks cool, it opens doors, you get on podcasts. Or was there another reason, or is that just the same reason?
It was, I was setting up my business in the UK from scratch, right? So the business was founded in Germany, and I set up the UK office. So I needed something to go with to get clients as a door opener, to get on the conference circuit. And having a book reframes you as an individual, that's for sure. So you're no longer Johnny come lately knocking on the door saying, "Can I have a conference speaking slot, please?" And I say, "Yeah, that's 10 grand for a sponsorship, and we'll give you a 20-minute slot." Suddenly, you're a published author. So that reframing, which is indeed a behavioral science concept, certainly helps. But it wasn't only that. It was my attempt to capture the experience that I'd had learning from these guys on T-Mobile, which culminated in the relaunch of the brand around Europe, which was enormously successful. You may remember, this is going back a bit, the T-Mobile dance ad at London's Liverpool Street Station. It was the first flash mob, and it's got something like 42 million YouTube views. I mean, it's just astonishing. That would make it
copied so many times since, hasn't it?
It has.
Every brand copied it for years.
Exactly,
afterwards.
And this was before TikTok and Instagram. So we really only had Facebook and YouTube, but it spawned 72 Facebook groups, and in terms of business impact, it doubled footfall into retail stores within 48 hours. It's astonishing. It won an IPA effectiveness award for the impact on the brand and on sales and profitability. So that whole experience, I wanted to capture all of the principles behind that. So that was the real purpose of the book, to put all of this scientific stuff, which is often written in impenetrable language. I don't know if you've ever tried reading academic or scientific papers. It's an art form, honestly. So I wanted to put it in layman's speak, in terms that I would understand as a marketeer, as an ex-brand manager and marketing director. So it was really bridging that gap and making the translation from academia and science into pragmatic application. But that was first published in 2013. I revised and updated it 3 years ago, so it's in its second edition now. And one of the lovely testimonials actually was from Richard. He said that Decoded is the only behavioural science book that he's read twice. So, and he said that's positive, by the way.
From Richard.
Yeah, he said
decent.
Didn't mean I couldn't understand it. It's a positive. Rory Sutherland wrote the foreword to it. As well, and I've had a lovely testimonial from Mark Ritson saying, marketing's about behaviour change. Phil's the expert in this area. This book will help you become a better marketer. So fabulous accolades. I'm humbled by those sort of words. But that was the purpose, really, to translate.
It's amazing you got Mark to write a sentence without swearing in it.
Oh, I had to edit it a lot.
He's brilliant, Mark.
He's fabulous.
So shall we? So it'd be good to dive into some of the kind of the key lessons of the book, particularly the kind of the value that marketers listening to this can take away. And Chris and I have kind of pulled out a few areas that really kind of grabbed us. Now, the first was around category entry points, and about the need for brands to become the first choice in the brain. Do you want to start by kind of explaining what a category entry point is in the world of marketing, and then dive into some of those biases, I suppose, that can help influence the brand in that context?
Sure. Well, I think category entry points and the phrase that sits alongside them, which is mental availability, have both been made hugely popular thanks to the work of Professor Byron Sharp and the Ehrenberg Bass Institute. Byron's book, How Brands Grow 2 as well. So basically it's fabulous because it helps our understanding that human decision-making is always a product of the person and the situation that they're in. So context is key. And if you think about your own behavior, now I don't know, look at you guys, whether or not you enjoy the occasional alcoholic beverage, but on the basis that you possibly might, think about your choice of alcoholic beverage when you're on holiday versus when you're at home, when you're in a business meeting, whether it's a business lunch or a casual lunch, whether you're with friends, clients, colleagues, what the weather's like, whether you're indoors, outdoors, whatever it is. All of those are contextual factors. And you only need change one, and it changes your choice. It changes your decision. You are the one constant within that, which is why, incidentally, person-based segmentation is, in my view, utterly useless, because the same person behaves dynamically. We all do, but that's because context changes. So what category entry points do and help us understand is that contextual bit, because it's about the what, when, where, why, who we're with, where we are, what we're doing at the same time, etc. So it really forces marketeers to look at context as an important factor. The other bit linked with it is it's all about, given a certain context, which brands are mentally available. So which brand in particular comes to mind first as a choice. And that, if you think about ice cream, for example, you want to buy an ice cream on a sunny day in a park for your kids. There's certain brands come to mind. Versus you want to buy an ice cream to slob out on the sofa with your partner watching a movie. Or you want an ice cream as an accompaniment to a dessert that you're serving to guests. Those are all different category entry points. The context changes, and with that, your choice changes. The mental availability of brands changes with that context. So category entry point and mental availability are both great steps forward. And when you think about mental availability, it also has some important roots in neuroscience, because, and this is a study I cite in Decoded, that when people are asked to choose between brands and their favorite brand is present or not present, when their favorite brand is present, there's very little neural activity. The only parts of the brain that are activated are those to do with intuitive decision making, fast, frugal, energy efficient decision making, so-called system one. It's almost like literally a no-brainer decision. When the favorite brand is not present, so the person is now forced to reflect and think about the brand's on choice, there's lots more neural activity. And that's bad news for the brain, because brain activity expends energy. And the brain's sole mission is to help us survive on the planet, to pass on our DNA. That's all it is. So it will conserve energy whenever and wherever possible, which is exactly how this whole system one idea came about, that we've got very efficient, fast energy, and energy saving, if you like, mental processes that are geared for action, that help us make fast decisions, versus system two, which takes more reflection and burns more energy. But the point is, mental availability only really works for the first brand to mind, which again is plausible, because you don't spend money on the brand that comes to mind second. So you really want to understand which brand comes to mind first. Now it's possible to research that and get a list of those brands. The bit I think actually is missing, that I think is very important, is why does brand X come to mind first in those ice cream scenarios? Why are those different brands mentally available given those different contexts? That's a bit that I think is missing, because that why part of the category entry points is all about motivation, human motivation, and the why part is answered by understanding superiority, because the brain makes decisions based on the perceived fit with our goals. Now, goals is a concept that is been studied in cognitive social psychology and cognitive and affective neuroscience, and there's great consensus that human motivation is based on goal achievement, and that's a mixture of functional goals. I want something refreshing, I want fast broadband, I want transportation, I need clean clothes. So really, really important things that a brand has to deliver. But that's not enough anymore, because there are lots of brands that deliver those very well. And this is where there's another level of goals which are more implicit. They are social, emotional, and psychological goals. And superiority comes from the strength of implicit association that we build over time between brand X and goal Y. And it's the brain deeming that to be instrumental in helping us achieve our goals. Now, this might all sound highfalutin and theoretical, but let me make it practical for you. Sorry, let me just give you an example. So
yeah, that'd be great.
because this idea of superiority and choice ultimately and decision making works throughout our lives. So imagine you wanted to go out and have a great Saturday night out with some mates. Some of your mates will become will become mentally available because you have built associations between the concept of a great night out and friend X, Y, and Z, right? So you would select that group of friends. If, however, your job to be done, let's say, was you really wanted to thrash through a personal problem or a financial problem or whatever, and you really just wanted to do it one-to-one or maybe with a couple of mates, probably different mates would come to mind and be mentally available because you've learned they are going to be great listeners, give you great advice, and they're good sounding boards. They may or may not be the same guys who are going to help you have a wild night out on Saturday. But this mechanism, how the brain makes a choice, is exactly the same when it comes to brands. Which is the superior choice, i.e., which has the best fit with that particular job to be done, whether it's giving my kids something in the park on a hot day or serving ice cream with a dessert to guests or slobbing out on the sofa to watch a movie. The brain has learned over time, and this learning comes through everything we're exposed to over years, obviously through advertising, word of mouth, our own personal experience, everything we see and hear around us, which is what the academics call the statistics of the environment. Everything we take in, who's using it, when, on which occasion, etc., etc.
Because like if we've got we do PR, right? We run, Will and I run Prohibition, and we're a PR agency in Leeds, and obviously if you're a Yorkshire brand, we're probably the first brand. We're one of the biggest in Yorkshire. Depending on what you look at, we're probably the number one or number two, depends on what you're looking for. But if you're looking in the UK, we're a top 150 agency, which is great, and people have heard of us, and people listen to this podcast. But I'm just using this as an example. How would we make people who work in marketing think, oh, we should get some PR and we should work with them? How do you do that? Is that the most challenging bit of it?
Honestly, it's the same. It's the same thing brands have been doing forever. It's about exposure. It's about advertising. It's all of your touch points. It's sponsorship. It's promotions. It's everything, because the brain will learn from everything it perceives. So if they see your name in conjunction with a certain activity, a certain event, a certain client, that starts to create a link. And the more frequently we see that, and the greater the consistency with which we see it, the more sticky it will become. Because the saying in psychology is what fires together wires together in the brain. So it's the same way humans learn anything, whether we learn to drive, count, speak a foreign language, learn a musical instrument. It's about frequency and consistency of exposure. So there's no magic bullet. It's a slog, but it's how brands have been promoting advertising for years, in the B2B space as well as B2C.
Should we just get Stephen Fry to be our face of Prohibition then, and the third voice on the podcast? Is that what we're saying? So everybody associates, and the two things fire and wire together.
You could there's affordability is one issue.
It's slightly out of our budget.
But the other important consideration is, what associations do you want to borrow from someone like Stephen Fry? Because he already has a rich set of associations, right? And this is where you're looking for the fit and the congruence between your brand and whatever it is, a celebrity, an event, or whatever.
So Phil, I'm going to show that I've done a little bit of homework here. I believe you've recently done quite an interesting social media post about Sillet Bang. And you talk about how it's easier to, hold on, let me get this right. It's easier to retrieve a memory than build a new one. And for that reason, it's great that Barry Scott's been brought back for the Sillet Bang ad. So that presumably ties in with a lot of what you've just been saying now. Do you want to talk to us about that? Because we
Yeah,
all love that ad as well. The Sillet Bang ad.
absolutely. It is. It's all about learning, right? And once we've learned something, we are able to retrieve it given a certain stimulus. So we can all complete. I went to see Peter Kay a couple of years ago at the O2, and the first 20 minutes of his act was him starting off an advertising slogan or jingle, but only giving the first exactly, and getting the audience to complete it, and everybody loved it, and more importantly, everybody knew it. Right? They knew them because we grew up with them. So all of that stuff is exactly the same. And we did the study for Weetabix, looking at distinctive brand assets. Most of it was about packaging because they wanted to relaunch their pack. But we also included communication assets. And what they found, and to their great surprise, was that the line, have you had your, which they ditched 7 or 10 years previously, was, at the time of the study, the single most distinctive advertising line in the cereal category in the UK. So, no, absolutely. So for the agency BBH, this was, as the planners, Tom Roach, who said to me, this is like finding a Rembrandt in the attic. And in fact, he used that as the title of his IPA award-winning paper on the case study. So they brought back Have You Had Your Weetabix with the Jack and the Beanstalk campaign. They got 3 times the ROI on that advertising compared to their previous campaign. So it's incredibly powerful to do that. And that was exactly why I wrote that post about Sillet Bang. He's been off air, I think it's 7 years, but everyone will remember that bang and the dirt is gone. And it's really efficient. You can reawaken the neurons. That's the point. You're not having to learn something afresh every time. You're just working with what exists. It's a bit like, when you learn a language, you learn to play a musical instrument, you could drop it for a few years and go back to it. You might be a little bit rusty, but you'll pick it up again much quicker than if you'd started to learn something new.
Like muscle memory.
Absolutely.
Like brain
Absolutely.
muscle memory.
Yeah. It's exactly the same idea.
I'll have to ask Tom about that because I spoke to Tom yesterday, and Tom's coming on the show.
Oh, brilliant!
So actually, he's coming on the show. What's one question I should ask Tom then? Do you think?
You could ask him about Weetabix. Ask him whether it was difficult to sell the idea to the client of resurrecting that, because you see one of the issues, particularly with distinctive assets, is that when client personnel change, the new incoming brand manager, marketing director, whoever, wants to make his or her mark. I know I did when I was a brand manager. You want to put your stamp on something. You want to make a name for yourself. And one of the easiest knee-jerk ways to do that is to change stuff. Let's have a restaging. Let's refresh the packaging. We need a new ad campaign. And what I've learned since is that that's probably, providing your strategy is working, change is the worst thing you could possibly do. And it's a very brave marketeer who says, no, you know what? It ain't broke. Let's not change anything. We just stick at it. Doesn't mean you have to do everything the same, slavishly, 100% copy all the time. You can refresh at the what we call the signal level, so the creative, as long as you keep consistent at the meaning level. It's exactly what, for example, Lynx have done for years. They bring out a new fragrance, they have a new ad, but underneath it, the whole campaign and the whole brand proposition stays rock solidly the same.
Yeah.
So in effect, I mean, this is a nice problem to have, but if you're a brand that's got an amazingly recognizable, long-standing slogan or logo, you're stuck with it, really, aren't you? The smart decision is to stick with it, even if you're sick of it personally. Actually, It's still delivering for you, and it'd be foolish to change.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the the poster child example of this is Kit Kat, Have a Break, because that has been going for I don't know how many decades, but it's refreshed creatively, and everyone loves some of the clever things that they do, but the core proposition and the line remain unchanged. Now, I remember when I was a brand manager at Unilever, moving on to a brand and being invited out for lunch by the ad agency planning director. Now, at the time, I thought, oh, nice agency lunch, right the afternoon off. And I sat down with this lady. She was quite, very well revered in London creative circles, and rightly so. We dispensed with the pleasantries, and her opening gambit was basically, Phil, I've worked on this brand for a lot longer than you ever will, and I'll still be working on the brand long after you move on. So my plea to you is don't get up. And I was quite taken aback because I thought, this is a bit rude to say to a client. And I didn't fully understand what she meant, but now I do. And it's this whole point about consistency. Now, thank God that brand had her as a custodian. And you often find that with agencies with long tenures, they know more about the brand, and intuitively and implicitly they get it more than some of the clients who move around every couple of years. So having that touchstone who could say, no, we're not gonna change this, we're not gonna repaint it or whatever, that's really valuable.
It's amazing when creative agencies stay with a brand. I do think that does last longer. Will and I interviewed somebody who used to work for Yorkshire Tea. He was the head of marketing director at Yorkshire Tea, and they were with Lucky Generals? I think it is. Is that right, Will? Was it Lucky Generals or was it Uncommon? I've read that many marketing texts now. I forget where I'm at. I think it was Lucky Generals. For 18 years. Sorry if I got that wrong. But anyway, they were with them for 18 years and they're still with them. And I just think it's that being brave enough to stay with somebody who can keep, when you were talking about the links example, I was thinking Specsavers. Because then you should have gone to Specsavers. Same strap line, different execution every time. That's what works, isn't it? Rather than doing the same bloody advert. Although I would go back to, you mentioned Peter Kay, and we were talking the other day. Some of the adverts from back in the day, not to be too nostalgic. Do you remember the John Smith's adverts? I reckon if John Smith had to do a new campaign, they could just bring them back. Do you know what I mean? 'Cause they were hilarious.
Was it Arkwright, the character? I can't remember. Maybe someone like that. It's
called. There was that one where his mum was doing the hoovering, and he said, "Come on, I've spoken to the care home. They're going to take you." She's like, "I'm 55." He's like, "It's okay." It's just Peter Kay is brilliant.
But from a neuroscience point of view, there are advantages to this refreshing creative, because what the brain is always trying to predict something, right? Going back to its mission to keep us alive. Now, if what it sees each and every time is the same, it recognizes that and then stops processing. Because it's like, I know that. I don't need to pay further attention. I don't need to expend any more cognitive effort on that. So what you need is this blend of novelty and familiarity, which is what Specsavers do brilliantly, what KitKat does brilliantly. So you know the brand, but then the execution is new, and you pay attention to that. You get a little payoff because, particularly in the Specsavers one, they're always quite amusing. So it's like, oh yeah, I know that, and it's going to make me laugh, and it then reinforces the Specsavers message, and then that passes into common parlance and culture, doesn't it? It comes into everyday language when people make a mistake, like, oh, we should have got to Specsavers. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
I suppose for a brand, the challenge is knowing when you've hit gold and not just sticking with something that isn't very good for a long period of time. I think that's the test, isn't it? Because there'd be nothing worse than sticking with a strapline that doesn't particularly work for 15 years in the belief that it's going to eventually gain some traction.
Yeah, well, I think that you probably find out in your bottom line whether it's working or not.
Yeah.
So, if you had some advice then, so what are the 3 things that you think marketeers in 2026 should be doing to get ahead? So if they're sat there thinking, right, I've got my campaign ready, I know what I'm doing, what are your 3 tips to make sure that it's going to be like better? I don't know. Have I picked 3 because that's behavioral science? I don't know, Phil.
The power of 3. Everyone always says exactly. 3 things because it's easy for people to remember, I think. So my first and most important, one thing at least, and this is what I wish I'd known when I was a brand manager, is this understanding that human motivation is founded on goal achievement. So it's understanding, working out what goals is my brand instrumental in helping people achieve, because that's what I need to signal through all of my activities, across all of my touch points, in all of my communications. Brand X helps me deliver whatever the functional goals are, but also the social, emotional, psychological goals. And if people want to learn more about that, there's a whole chapter in my book devoted to goals. It's so fundamental and so important. So that would be the first plea, if you like. And as I said, I wished I'd known that when I was a young brand manager. Secondly, I think is, and this is a bit more difficult to grasp, but it's definitely worth thinking about, that perception beats cognition every time. So going back to this idea of the story of Flexed and the brick wall, that we know rationally that that's a clever idea, that the brick wall is flexing because this guy is using a flexible tariff. But perception overrides it totally. And first impressions count, and first impressions last. And there are so many behavioral science experiments that prove this. I mean, giving people, for example, two desserts. One is a brown dessert, the other is a creamy coloured dessert, and they taste them. You ask them what they are. They say the cream coloured dessert is vanilla and the brown coloured dessert is chocolate. And the trick is they're identical. Right? They are both vanilla desserts, but one's been coloured brown with food colouring. But because we consume with our eyes, the eyes tell the brain to expect chocolate, and subjectively we experience chocolate, right? And perception beats cognition, even though you could tell people till they're blue in the face, that is not chocolate, that's vanilla. But no, it's chocolate. It tastes of chocolate. So that whole area is super important. And I think the third is understanding codes, understanding that the brain is brilliant at decoding X as meaning Y. So this is really the province of agency creatives, but using text and images that support your message. And a simple and obvious example is something like flowers. If a lady in your office has a birthday, would you give her a bunch of sunflowers or a bunch of red roses? Right, it would be probably wholly inappropriate to give this lady a bunch of red roses, because we have learned that red roses decode as having a certain meaning of love and romance, etc., etc. Whereas sunflowers decode as having a meaning of nature, the sun, warmth, uplifting, positivity, optimism, things like that. So understanding that X equals Y in the brain is also really super important, because you can unwittingly use codes that have a completely wrong meaning. So it's understanding that as well. So those would be my three things.
Well, I think people are going to be listening to this thinking they absolutely want to speak to you and also read your book. So do you want to let people know how they can get hold of you and where they can find the book as well? Because, yeah, I'm sure people will want to be ordering that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, the easiest for the book is Amazon. So you can either search my name, Phil Barden, or Decoded: The Science Behind Why We Buy. Make sure you get the green cover, not the orange cover. The green cover is the updated and revised edition, which, by the way, Richard Shotton said will make a wonderful excuse to now read it 3 times. So there you go. If people want to get hold of me, only 3, yeah. Get hold of me personally, either LinkedIn, I'm on there, can connect with me, message me, or if they want to email me directly, I'll be very happy. My email address is phil@decodemarketing.com, and that's decode marketing, all one word, all lowercase, .com. So there you go, LinkedIn, email, or the book, or the book.
And Phil, our final question that we ask every guest is, and every guest goes, oh, that's a really hard question. If you were us, who is the next person you'd invite on this show and why?
Okay. So you've already mentioned Rory. He would be my first choice because of the link to behavioural science. But someone else whose acumen insights, intelligence, and just general all-round amazing bloke who I absolutely adore is a guy called Mark Earls. So Mark wrote a book called Herd, which is all about the nature of us being a social species. He's written follow-up books like I'll Have What She's Having, and another one called Copy, 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 which is, as the name suggests, is about herd behavior and humans copying behavior. He would be a fabulous guest. He's an ex agency planning director, super smart, super lovely, would be you'd have a great conversation with him. So Mark Earls.